To be precise, we're going to prepare for PHP 9. And we're going to look at the code from the deprecation point of view, whatever is currently deprecated in the code and in the engine. That will probably spur or yield some messages. To give you an idea, there's 248 error messages, and we've got 45 minutes. So let's get ready, because that's going to be an intense session. But so more precisely, of course, we cannot cover that. Plus, there might be a few duplicates. But we're going to review the ones that are important, and also where they can manifest themselves, where in the code you could have a surprise and suddenly realize that, yeah, I'm going to prepare something for PHP 9. That's for the future. And then we'll also ask ourselves one important question, which is, what will happen? I mean, at the moment, it's deprecated. By definition, it works, but it yells at you. OK, it's a situation. But what will happen when it's actually removed? Because that's the next step. So again, we're going to look at that. Sometimes it's not that obvious what will happen in the future. And also, just to mention the scope of this presentation, I have absolutely no idea, nor even information to give you of what is going to be PHP 9. If you want some information, you can just do like me, go on PHP SRC, and you will find that page, which has 6 items, and the first one is from 2023. So no one knows what happens here. Maybe the PHP developers from the PHP Foundation, they might have some clues. I don't see many of them, but if I find one and they heckle me, then I will show them to you. But we can still get prepared to it. It's a bit, the life of an expat. You know what you're leaving, you don't know where you're going. That's exactly us at the moment. So I'm not going to tell you what's PHP 9, but what we're going to lose in the process. And actually, I did some stats of the number of deprecation we can find in the engine at the moment, starting from PHP 8 and going up. And the graph itself is a bit mundane, but it has lots of interesting information. So you can see my number of 250. We are in April, so PHP 8.5 has very little deprecation. Usually the deprecation bonanza frenzy is somewhere in July. You can follow that on wiki.php.net, where there is the RFC, where we decide whatever we want to get rid of. And you can see that it's pretty regular. It starts with 40, then 80, and stuff like that. It's about every iteration we get 40 to 50 new deprecations. So I expect by November, to have probably 200 or 300 of them ready. I also enjoy the fact that, well, we have deprecation because we want to prepare for next version. When we are the next version, every deprecation becomes completely obsolete, removed, and we start from not 0. We start off the bat 40. New version, already deprecation. Who the hell? What's the point, right? We should start at 0, at least for a few months, and then we have more. No, that's off the bat. So we'll see what happens for the actual PHP 9. And I will insist on that part. We don't really know what happens with the deprecations. There are some that are a bit obvious. If it's a PHP function that disappears, you're going to get an undefined function. Sometimes we get removed message, which is a bit of a paradox by itself. It's like, hey, you could not use that. That's good. I'm telling you that it was not there anyway, so that's good. But that happens. Otherwise, it could yield an exception, and that's probably where you're going to feel the pain of doing the migration to a new version, because, yeah, suddenly what was working is not working at all. So it's not always obvious when we are on one of those deprecations. We'll try to think about what might happen when we actually do the migration. We have the deprecation and when it turns into something else. Now, for those of you who don't know me, I've been doing PHP since last millennium. Oh, thank you. Yeah, well, we're getting less and less of us who can do that joke. But the experience I get from for this presentation is based on my experience on the static analysis, because obviously that's one thing. You want to review the code, not with your eyeballs, with an automated tool to see what is going to happen soon and that you can anticipate. So that's coming from there. there are two different references at the top that you can use where I showed some of the deprecation for which I've worked. There is one about change behaviors, because deprecations is also some things that sneakily change, but without being deprecated. Some of them are here. The other ones are in the error messages. You could find a good number of them. Last thing, if you're interested in working with me, then my company is hiring, so come and talk to me afterwards. We need a lot of PHP developers for growth, for helping people plug their electric vehicle everywhere in the street. If you don't want to work with me, it also works. It's a large company. You can also not work with me. But I will look for your career. So, where are the deprecations? As I said, 250 of them at the moment. That's way too many. So I've broken them down into 3 categories. The obvious one is the remove structures, things that used to have a name, and then that just going to disappear. The modernization of the language, that's an ongoing process since probably PHP 7, things that are getting better, bugs that were there we did not know, but now we know, and then we want to remove them. And the last part is just bizarre stuff, where we actually might get some insight on future PHP 9 features. But that will be your opinion at that point. So, remove structures. Of course, we start with the crown jewel of PHP, functions in general. And yes, there's a good number of them disappearing. UTF-8 encode and decode, that's going away. No one has used that, right? It's not good. OK. So it's probably a modernization of the language. Those 2 functions disappear. The feature of converting something to the UTF-8 encoding stays. It's just that it was not felt as a good place to be in the string department, but it's now moved to mbstring and iconv. So the feature is still here. We're not just deciding to turn into Big 5 and Chinese characters everywhere. No, it's still there. But there are extensions which are better maintained, that are better for you to use. So those 2 goes away, and there will be less maintenance on PHP. The next one, OBDBC result all, is pretty fun because, well, first, no one uses OBDBC. Yeah, sounds about right. Oh, no, so I see a few timid, shy hands. But it's very PHP 3 style, because this does not just return the result, it does output an HTML table, which is nice when you're doing PHP 3. I have to admit that nowadays you want a bit of more control of it. So this one just disappears. It's obviously obsolete. Less obviously obsolete LCG value. I have no idea what's LCG. It's probably an acronym of something. But it's one of the bases for entropy in random characters. So generally speaking, all the random function in PHP, I mean, not the extension, but the random srand, empty rand, and stuff like that, they're going away because they're too weak. They were good again in 2003. They're not good enough nowadays. And this one is one of the bases. You can still use rand, of course, not for cryptography. Probably just move to random in general. mhash. I thought about listing the 5 function there, but that's the whole extension going away. So just imagine this one just disappears. Array options, we're going to see it back. The fun part with libxml disable entity loader, beside the fact it's very long to say, it's already disabled. So this is one of the practice of PHP, which is to remove to hollow out basically the function. It's not doing anything, but to avoid undefined function and a break in your code, it's still there. But this has been disabled basically since PHP 8. 0, sorry. 8 is 0. So you can't use it anymore. The feature is gone. You cannot load remote entities that way. And now PHP is telling you. Nice? I don't know. The next one is already removed. It's a wrong format that no one used. And the one that I discovered that's already gone is each. Well, no one used that anymore. I mean, that's one point. But I've been, seeing each somewhere since PHP 3 in the code, and this one is completely gone. But that's out of our process. It's already gone, so it's not even deprecated. So what do you expect from a PHP function disappearing? Syntax error? No, you can make typos in the code, and PHP will just say nothing. It will execute that until the point no function, boom, fatal error. I don't see how they can do syntax error at that point. But anyway, so yes, undefined function. I do find that a bit weird, especially after the each stuff, because it's a classic function somewhere in the code to have an each that appears. And if this is undefined, it means now you can redefine it yourself and put something else there. So I consider it some kind of a security problem, function that you would expect. Do something, now you can hide it in plain sight and make it available. But also I was reminded myself that we have the failback mechanism in PHP. PHP will look in the namespace if there is a function, so let's say something unused like print r, and if it's defined in that namespace, it will use it first. And then, since no one defines print r in the namespace, it falls back to the global namespace. But you can always, find something, put a definition somewhere, and actually include your own code there. So this notion of undefined function versus someone else is defining it for you, yeah, anyway, it's another problem somewhere else. Also, we can have replacement function, polyfills. If you really want each as the way it was behaving before, probably you can find some composer object that can do it for you. Next one, easy, of course, constants. That works the same. There was something with a name and disappears. I want to attract the attention on the way they behave. So isStrict, just like libxml function, it has been hollowed out. It does not cover any error messages anymore. So nowadays, it's also deprecated. So you use it, you get an error message. On the other hand of the spectrum, you've got e-user error, which is still there, and you can use. I mean, if you want to echo its value, that's probably useless, but you can do it, no error. If you start using it in the only place where you can use it, which is trigger error, there you get an error message. Why do we have two different behaviors? I don't know. At least, yeah, that would be the place to mention it. And user errors is going away because most of the time we don't want to rely on the PHP engine to generate those fatal errors. We can do that very well ourselves with an exception. So the idea here is that instead of using triggers for errors, use an exception. If you still want to notice something, cute and tiny, yeah, they still exist. So you can still use those. And there's nothing like a warning exception halfway. I don't know. So those two still exist. The last one is gone. What else do we have? Empty rand, again, cryptography stuff. It's a constant that will yell at you if you use it. And those are also completely removed, and their value is going to be removed soon. So it's just, again, a polite warning that you can't use that, but the feature is already gone. What about deprecated classes? That would be scary, right? So good thing there's none of them. None of them, well, there's not too many of them, but none of them have been deprecated, so you can go there. Now, in terms of structures, there are other things in PHP that get a name and disappears. Directives. And that has been a big hunt at the moment in PHP for the last versions. Those directives are things you usually put in the PHP ini file that is going to trigger some behavior of PHP when it runs, are going away. PHP default, which has a close cousin called the PHP default flag. Pretty sure you know all the difference. Yeah, so it's a good thing that you don't have to learn PHP default. But one of them is going away because it was deemed too confusing to use correctly. Sessions get actually two different sets of things going away. The first one is the entropy. So again, remember cryptography, obviously there's a lot of work on how to secure those IDs that we're generating. We don't want them to be guessed easily. So that's the first four. The one that is important and interesting to notice is the use cookie only. So if you were passing your session ID in the URL via post headers or directly as get, that is not possible anymore. Currently, it's possible, but it's Very insecure, of course, knowing that you can put that as a cookie that stays a cookie that is not even accessible from JavaScript and other elements of the browser. You can mention it's online, I mean, on secure connections only and things like that. So that part is stay there. Contrary to libxml or the other features, this one stays. This is also a nuance. When you say deprecated, it doesn't mean it goes away. It might mean that you don't have the choice to do anything else, and it's now the default and only behavior. And this is one of those cases. You can only use sessions now with cookies. Well, you will be doing that, again, PHP 9. But in between, we can still choose. So deprecation might mean you see the feature go away, or might mean you keep it completely on. Assert. There were five of them. All of them are gone. And at that point, while writing that, I thought, hold on. Assert is this function. Probably some of you have used that, where you can put little checks in your code, and it will tell you, OK, this is something. I've checked the current data, and something is wrong. But you can also disable those checks. It's like a big if that you put somewhere in the code to make an extra check. But when you go to production, you disable the assertions and make them inactive. So you don't have those checks on production. You still have a bug, but you just don't know it. Yeah, I've been there. The one that is funny is that you add assert active. Again, you have to read the docs. This is for using the assertion with strings. Again, PHP 3, we used to have assert with a piece of string that would include code. And that's kind of still possible nowadays for backward compatibility. That string would be executed through an eval as code, and then the result would tell you if the assertion is good enough. And again, PHP style, PHP 4, it makes sense. Nowadays, it's a lot better. We don't have to do that. We can write code, and it will not be executed. It will be parsed. Obviously, it's in the code. But it will be not executed. So you have to remember there's another option that will actually take care of disactivation of assertions. And this is Zend assertions, not Zend active. OK, so just sometimes you have to be careful and know exactly which one is going away. So now we've done classes, functions, constants, directives. What else? What else can get deprecated? Syntax? Yeah, that's going to be next big chapter. In between, we can go with parameters. And this one is even worse because it's the default value of a parameter. Anyone who's been there with the HTML special cars debacle in PHP 5 something will have good. I feel your pain. So at that point, there was HTML special car, which would turn special characters into the HTML sequence. So far, so good. Except for some reason, between two versions, it was turned from Latin 1 to UTF-8. And it was not exactly escaping the same characters. So here we've got at least a warning, and it's an interesting warning. So on this, everything that is related to CSV, so writing it, reading it with the object version. I just put one of the function here. The escape parameter is going to be removed depleted of his default value. So nowadays, no one cares. You have a stream, you have the values, write it there. It's fine, except that CSV is not specified. There's no escape character that is ever been defined. So no one knows. It means that it depends on the opposite party. And most of the time, the escape here is not the way to go. So nowadays, to avoid PHP bugs being flooded with questions about, why isn't that working? We're going to have to use it. The default value goes away. It's not often, but sometimes it happens. It may be down to that level of deprecation. How are we going to solve that? Because that's going to be yielding a fatal error, right? If you were calling fput CSV with two parameters and you have now a third one that is compulsory, that's going to be a fatal error, not enough argument. So to solve that, of course, and not break or provide too many arguments, because this is fun. This is not the third one that we need to put. We need to put the two others before actually using that. So go with the name parameters. That's just an extra step, and you put it as the last one, and that will work. But that might come to a surprise soon. Now we can go with syntax cleaning. And I'm pretty sure you know from this one, what is the next one, right? Parentheses?
Brackets on the strings?
Bracket on the strings? No, not yet. The one I really enjoy, because it's really like do as I do and don't do as I say, is that we're going to get PHP yelling at us if we decide that one of the values that is optional is in the middle, and non-optional is after the last one that has default value. Which is exactly what PHP is doing to us on the previous one, right? Because we now suddenly have a parameter that has no default value that is compulsory. So when you start with that and you come with, again, PHP 3, the arguments are positional. First argument in the call goes in the first position, second argument goes in the second position. This is why for a long time, having 3 times the same argument with the same name would work. Yeah, it's not possible anymore. But there was a time where it was possible. The first parameter, position 1, argument A. Position 2, argument A. Position 3, argument A. That worked. Nowadays, it's not possible. But PHP still has to assign the argument based on the position. And if you may miss one point, then it doesn't know where to stop and where to start giving default values. So if you give enough of them so that it covers all the compulsory argument, it works. Code discipline would work. You can actually have that in your code and not know about it. If you're missing one of the compulsory arguments, second line, then you're going to have a problem because PHP is not able to guess which one. And finally, if you use name parameter, it works. I just love, the comparison between what they're trying to do and the result. Another point that actually kind of surprised me also is the deprecation notice when you're using floats as array keys. Yeah, it's a bit precise, right? But it might happen. You have prices. So PHP only accepts integers or strings as keys. And floats tends to be in the middle of the battle because if the float actually has enough zeros at the beginning of the decimal part, PHP will just turn that immediately into an integer and say it's OK, no error. So the second one here, the third one with the 2.0, that's not an error. PHP is able to turn that easily into an integer. Otherwise, it just drops the decimal part. And that's also something you have to pay attention to because people tend to think it's a rounding. It's not a rounding. It's like the easiest way to turn a number into an integer, just drop the decimal part, right? And that's what PHP does. So it might also be surprising if you're doing stats and try to understand where they are landing. That's the way it behaves. Last thing that is funny is that if you want to solve that problem in particular and still use floats, you can actually cast the floats into strings. So the float will basically turn into itself, and you can now use it because it's a string as a key. That's fine. And if you extract that again and do an extra mathematical calculation on that string, PHP will again be very lenient on you and say, OK, this is actually a float. I will turn that into a number, and then use it as it is. So maybe one of the things you can do is just, I'm in front of there. You can just cast it to a string, or if you cast actually an integer to a string, PHP will revert it, so that's useless. But cast thing to strings, and that will allow you to extract the value back on the way out. The other question I have here at that point is, so far it's deprecated. Obviously, it's a feature that we've been living around for a long time. What shall we do with that problem? I mean, shall we turn that into fatal error? It seems a bit excessive, right? On the other hand, no one is hard-coding floats as keys, right? I mean, if you do, maybe we can talk together. I have a consulting mission for you. So it's going to be completely dynamic. Things running, and then you end up with a few floats, you didn't pay attention, and something is happening. So I don't know, exception. Now, at that point, it's deprecated. Maybe a warning would be sufficient, saying, you're trying to do something that is going to change your value anyway, so don't do that. Fatal error will be too much, I think. Now, other things that are there, and this one I'm pretty sure no one has been affected by that, because that was tested. When you are inside double quotes, well, you can interpolate variables, like replace them with the actual value. And there are way more syntaxes. Like you can start with a dollar, curly, put a whole expression there. Don't try to create a closure there. It's probably not going to work. But you can do lots of miserable things there. Or the other one over there, which is pretty fun because you have now, of course, the dollar first, and the var is actually a literal string. It's not a constant. Anyway, no one's used that because that has been checked, and this is going to go away. So, but that's interesting to see that the code is getting cleaned because we still have to deal with a number of other valid situations that are a bit bewildering. Just for fun, all of them are valid except one. Now, the first one is valid. Who said the first one? Come on. No, I'm probably in the way of it. No, it's the last one. It's the last one. Who's using curly braces on arrays? It's deprecated, by the way. So, other deprecated things that are coming and popping a bit everywhere, using null as a parameter. That's a modernization of PHP. Here, if you want to get the string length of a null, you get an error. And you will probably get a type error soon. Okay. Obviously, in the previous times, we would have something like, hey, I'm reading something from whatever source I have. If I have nothing, I will not get a string. I will get null. But I still want to go on with my code, so I expect that to be working. It's not the case anymore. PHP is getting more strict about those. You can see that everywhere. You can see that, for example, on substring. Substring used to be able to say, oh, if it's an error, like I'm trying to make a substring of something that's well beyond the end of the string, I get a false, which immediately is turned into an empty string, so no one is really seeing it. But nowadays, no, it just returns an empty string, which means that whoever was doing substring equal false or true would have now a problem because that's not possible anymore. That's completely dead code due to the engine making an evolution. So you have that here, null in general. There are still places where it's used. You can use also the coalesce with what I like is the best fix, which is if it exists, put it there. If it does not exist, aka it's null, then use the default value of null. I just love the contradiction in the code, right? It's like, yeah, if it's null, then use that value. Okay. Yeah. But anyway, it does make sense because at least it hides the error. I mean, it hides the fact that you know if it's not existing, then you want the default value. It's not appearing magically from your code. And also, I would like to mention that false is probably the next one in line to tell you that, yeah, we don't want to do a string on that. At that point, in particular, if you compare that with the true below, it probably means that the false is turned into an empty string, then you get 0, while the 1 would probably get into a not empty string, and then you get a string length of 1. No, it's the Boolean false. But yeah, it also looks like that. Yeah. Anyway, so again, for PHP 9, I don't know how is that going to be. You're going to see those deprecation probably turned into type errors soon. And then when we're done with null, false will probably start cropping up your code. So We also have the coalesce operator for that. It's just less used. Now, moving on, other things that disappears, we've already seen parameters being a bit special. Some of them among the values that are there goes away. So using MBString, which is all about encoding, but using it for conversions between those, I would say more computer science encoding for communication, base 64, stuff like that. There's a good list of them that are disappearing because in general we have functions that are related. Oh, nice, mouse. So base 64, we already have base 64 encode and decode. So that was removed from MBString. uEncode is the same. We've got the convert. I'm not going to point out the fact that PHP is not consistent with its naming schema, but there's a function for that. If you want to convert something to HTML, there's at least HTML special cars. No one apparently is converting code to 7-bit. So this one will be directly a fatal error. You can't really change, you can't really use that anymore. And if you want to convert something to UTF-8, you're going to use, who's not been listening? You cannot use that. This is still valid. This is not deprecated. Guys, drink some coffee before coming. Gee. But the most fun part of PHP 8 is getting rid of dynamic properties. Oh, yes. This is nice. So there are different things. Currently, it's a silent error. You make a typo, and PHP will go on with it. It's no problem. It's actually even solving your type problem because the one that is dynamically created just appears. No type, no default value, visibility is public. Woo! Everything is easier. Until you realize that, of course, there is a typo and you're not exactly showing the data in the right place. And now it's a bit too late because you were actually writing a library and now everyone relies on your typo. Ask people from HTTP Referer when they ask dictionary to say, hey, look, our version is actually more prominent because we're using it more often than yours. So yeah, PHP does not accept that as a property by default. The idea is to help you not write things. Even if it does not exist, then of course you know it early and you're not going to misplace it. That's a good one. In terms of security, if you have ever tried that, that works. You can actually take any object, add some extra property. Of course, if internally it already has that property, it's not going to work. But there's room. And then on the other side of your application, get again the connection. Database connection is something that goes around a lot. Get back that connection, and you can have the value. It's like some hidden ways of passing around global values. Probably not useful for everyone, maybe for security enforcement, but that's there. So we have that. The most important part, I would say, is that it makes the footprint of a class a lot more calculable, previsible. It could be known beforehand. And at that point, it means that PHP can anticipate the amount of data or memory it needs to allocate for objects and show a lot more objects inside the same space. Before that, I'm going just to show the different ways you want to get around that, if you still want to use that, because there are objects that are variable size. We now have a specific attribute, which is pretty much eponymous, allow dynamic properties. Do I need to explain anything? That's exactly the point. You just put it on one of the classes, and that's it. You can now, again, have the same behavior. Just need to anticipate that and put that everywhere, but that works. You can also explicitly extend std class, another one, and you can also rely on, if you're good enough, with get and set. Might not fit everyone's bill. You can also put all of them in the same class, and it also works. Again, don't do that. On the other hand, I was talking about memory. The evolution, the amount of memory used when you have different structures that are basically the same. Here you have standard class, associative array, extended standard class, even an anonymous one, or basically what we want to have here. It's a named class with all the properties being correctly defined. You can see that some of them start very low. We can show 4,000 objects with a steady class on a 2 MB memory allocation. And when you go to an actual named class, we're now up to 13,000. There's basically a factor of 3 between the amount of things you do when you have variable properties and the one that you have when you actually name everything, and PHP can save and just allocate the same amount all the time. And that shows actually across PHP versions. 2 megabytes in PHP 5.6, you would have like 4,000 classes, objects being created, and nowadays we're now back to 13. So there's definitely a lot of improvement. The higher, the better here. There's an improvement in memory, so you're going to save, on processes and architectures and things like that. I also checked for processing speed, and there is a slight gain, but it's not exactly significant. I mean, it depends on how high is your load. There is something, so turning like 10,000 operations on an STD class will definitely be a little bit slower than the other one. It's like 10 to 20%. Depends on what you need. I mean, for every day, yeah, it's probably not important, but for other operations, it might be. I think the memory part is probably more characteristic. Now we've got a few minutes to finish with the bizarre stuff, things that, why the hell is that deprecated? Implicitly marking argument, that's a bug that has been around for a long time. If you put a type on an argument and you give it a null value, then the type is nullable. Out of the blue. The really fun part is that if you decide to hide the null inside a constant, the nullable does not appear. So when PHP can guess that this is a null, it will decide to update your type hint, and you will see that, I mean, it's here. You will see that in the error message. It's telling you this is this type expected. No, I wrote something else. But here it decided, no, that's the one. So yeah, and that's also a common practice. I'm pretty sure all of you are using that at the moment somewhere in your code. So the other solution here, be obvious, I mean, be explicit, just put it there. It helps static analysis. Now we know upfront what's in that type and what we can expect, and we're going to yell that you're not processing them correctly. That's a good one. But that's an evolution, probably a bug that was there for a long time. A new word. Ever heard about autovivification? Yeah, when you play Scrabble, it gets a lot of points. This is when you turn an object, a false, a Boolean, into directly an array. Why does it need a name? I don't know. But it's nice, it's cute. It fills biology classes. So if you start with a false and you decide to call it as an array, it works and it's clean. Again, this is very default behavior. There were other functions that would return either an array upon success, or it would return false upon an error. And if you didn't want to go on and check first, you would just immediately use it as an array. I mean, PHP would be very lenient and say, OK, yeah, I'm going to turn that into an array for you. It's the same behavior for null. So null is not subject of that deprecation. You can still do that with null, give value null, and then immediately use it as a syntax array. One of the reasons would be that if you start doing that down the levels of nesting arrays, like multidimensional arrays, yeah, at some point you're going to have to create an object, an array on something that is not existing yet. So I don't see that going away. Fun part, of course, if false has autovivification, true does not. Do not try to convert an array into a true Boolean into an array, because that does not work. The other thing that was fun, because of course I tend to be a bit sneaky, I created a property with the type false or array, and try to do the vivification, and you get the error message. So it's really like don't turn them one into the other. I mean, except with an if condition. What do we have there? Underscore is forbidden. Bummer, right? There was a function called underscore. I mean, there still is. It's the equivalent. It's an alias for get text, because obviously it's used for translations. So you're going to litter your code with calls to get text. That's kind of polluting. So you call just underscore. There's no constant, but I really like codes that looks like that. Maybe I've played too much with the web shells. But so no, underscore is now forbidden. It's still a legal name for a class or whatever, a trait, an enumeration. But it's planned, at least at the moment, to be used for pattern matching, which would be, I would say, an extension of the equal we have or the regexes. We would just put that directly into the syntax. I would say take a look at the wiki. It's still work in progress, so maybe that will end up in PHP 9, and that could be something big enough to be mentioned. But that's the moment where the deprecations give you a little hint on the future, but not too many. I think we're going. Oh yeah, he's there. You're not big enough, right? Let's finish that. There are things that are really weird. I want to mention it because it's fun. PHP will tell you to use absolutely when you're doing sorting. It requires now a hint. Probably just to do some promotion for the spaceship operator, which no one is using. It's like 7% of the code is using it. So it's like, who cares? So I think that they're trying to promote the spaceship operator by forcing you to go with hints. Usually people go with bools. Makes sense. You just make a comparison. If you mix the two of them, you're going to run into a big problem. If you keep the bool there but use the spaceship operator, you have to remember that +1 will be true, 0 will be false, -1 will be true. So usually you make the mistake once and you spend an afternoon wondering what the hell happens with the sorting mechanism. So just make sure that it's the same. I try to check if using the spaceship operator, at least having two values instead of just, yes, it's better or it's bigger or smaller, but having three of them, which is like it's bigger, it's equal, it's smaller, there's no performance gain. So I don't really know why we get that at the moment. Still have to investigate. Unserializing, this is a really sneaky one. So when you serialize data, PHP way, the string has an S, and so far, I have no why, the capital S was also allowed as a type. So you can see there's an S3, and there it's a capital 1. Yeah, that's going to be a bummer if it turns into a fatal error. In particular, if you've been storing those values badly created somewhere in the database, and now you have to basically just review the whole database. If you also have created a remote system in another language, but have emulated PHP serialization tools, yeah, now they have to be strict. Anyway, that's sneaky. Increment on non-alphanumeric, that's one of the darlings of PHP. That's one of those favorite Easter egg of all time. If you get a string and you do a ++ on it, it will actually increment over the letters. And once you reach Z, then of course it will actually extend the string and try again. It does not work with --, PHP will just treat that as an integer and remove everything. So. But if you're building some kind of a spreadsheet, when you end at 26 columns and then you go to the next one, is AA. That was so useful. So of course the people who are creating, Excel ersatz are very unhappy. And for that time, the feature is still there. So it's not exactly deprecated. It's just pushed to the side. And now we also get the str decrement. So if you want to do a --, on the string, that works. Sorry? Minus for?
The decrement for A.
Oh, I don't know. I haven't tried that. Oh, yeah, you're right. You're worse than me, actually. And finally, I wanted to mention this one that is fun. So we had the curly braces. You all know that it's gone since PHP 8. And I want to do a little bit of an evolution, because in PHP 7, the curly braces were still accepted, so that was good. Then we had PHP 7.4, and we started getting the deprecation notice. So you might have very short amount of time to do deprecation. And then in PHP 8, we ended up with a fatal error because it doesn't work. We do not support that anymore, but we got a message telling us this is what happened. Don't do that. And in 8.3, that was finally upgraded to its final form, 8.4. It's a parse error. And this is an important thing, because there's lots of features, once they are deprecated, yeah, there's no support for it, even at the parser level. And the parser is the first one who's going to yell at your code saying, hey, yeah, that doesn't work. So sometimes, if you anticipate new versions and you run just the linting on your code, you realize you've got syntax errors. It's like, yeah, I've got CI that has been running on all those. Why is it I get a syntax error? No, it's just a feature that finally disappeared. And this is a bit paradoxical, because you can't really have PHP check everything and say, hey, look, you have written this way, and that does not exist. And that would be lots and lots of error messages all the time. So at some point, PHP does the minimum viable amount of work. It's like, syntax error. Just be aware of that. If they pop up, it's probably you missed a feature that's gone. So thank you very much. We're going to finish on that one. Just this last joke. PHP used the attribute deprecated internally. You can use it also for yourself. That will yield exactly the same error, but with your code at the PHP engine. The only thing I have at that point is that when the time comes, how are we going to deprecate that class? I'll be back to tell you about that. Thank you very much.